Hey, this is Mike Spiegel, and I'm here interviewing Max Shank. We're getting ready for the Ultimate Athleticism Workshop, which is coming to Crunch 59th Street on December 19th to December 20th. Couldn't be more excited for this workshop. The joke is that I brought it in for selfish reasons. It's less for my students and my trainers, and it's more for me. It's not actually a joke, it's true. But I'm very excited here because I've been getting a lot of questions from my trainers as to what this workshop's going to entail. And at this point, I have some questions for Max. How you doing today, Max?
Oh man, well I'm doing great. I hope I can live up to the hype here.
Think you'll do okay.
Yeah.
Um, Now, this is my understanding of this is how I explain ultimate athleticism. I say you got this guy Max Shank. He's kind of a superhero. He can do all this body weight stuff and gymnastics type stuff. He lifts heavy weights. He can, from powerlifting to Olympic lifting, like in the video that big snatch that you do. Highland Games competitor, martial artist, and people often say, "Hey, this guy's a genetic freak. He's just really strong, and he's lucky to have good genes." And to that, he would say, "No, I just train really well and efficiently," and that is kind of how ultimate athleticism is born. Sometimes I wonder, is that more my description, or is that there's some truth to that? So, what type of training have you done and are you currently doing that have led to ultimate athleticism? But more importantly, what exactly is ultimate athleticism and how do you define that?
Well, thank you, by the way. I think your definition was pretty solid. I would say that I do have some genetic predisposition to weight gain and building muscle or building fat at the same time. So I've always been able to put on weight really easily, which I think translates to strength pretty well. As far as what types of training I've done, I've kind of done it all at one point or another. I didn't actually start weight training until I was about 18 years old. And back then, I could do a very shaky 35-pound dumbbell bench press and zero pull ups. And, the big thing is I've just been super consistent. Now, even though I've been doing lots of different types of training, the past decade or so, I haven't missed a week. I've always been doing something progressing forward. And I did CrossFit, I did kettlebells only, I did bodybuilding only, I did powerlifting style training only, I did Olympic lifting for a while only. I did just, calisthenics. I tried, doing just pure gymnastic stuff for a while. And what I found is every time I switched gears, I ended up encountering a group of people who told me that whatever I was working on was the only thing I needed to do. So
Right?
if someone's, a power lifter, they're going to tell you that the answer to any fitness question is powerlifting. If someone's an Olympic lifter, the answer is always Olympic lifting. If someone's a, body weight or a street workout guy, they're like, "Oh, it's all body weight. You shouldn't even lift weights." And I'm just like, you know, my background actually is in economics and Spanish. That's what I went to school for. So
Oh, wow.
if this whole fitness thing doesn't work out, I can sell burritos at fair market value. But
Nice.
basically, it's uh, every exercise you do can be categorized, and it has like an energy cost and an ROI. So you want to get a return on your investment for everything you're doing. And what ultimate athleticism is was me trying to put together a way to marry the best little pieces of training that I could from each of their different training styles that I thought would yield the best well rounded athlete with the least amount of time and energy investment so you can go do other fun things. So the whole idea of ultimate athleticism is based on simple tenets of economics and also based on a lot of the philosophy from Bruce Lee about, absorbing what is useful and discarding what is useless. So that's really where ultimate athleticism came about. I want someone to be able to hit it in the gym or hit it in their strength training so they can go play tennis or go do jiu-jitsu or go do Thai boxing or go do Highland Games and still be competitive and have a good time at it.
That's awesome. So, because the ultimate athleticism philosophy and your own background involves mixing and matching different modalities and incorporating these different styles of training, what do you think is the best way to achieve balance in combining all these different styles of training?
The most important thing with combining the different styles of training is to kind of combine like terms. So if you look at something, I'll give you a very simple example: a barbell military press, a handstand push up, and a kettlebell military press. To me, those are all just upper body pushing exercises in the vertical plane. So, what you also have to consider, once you figure out which things can kind of be viable substitutes for one another, you have to figure out what's going to have the best carryover to the others. So, for example, in the question of, handstand push up versus military press, if you get to the point where you can do some freestanding handstand push ups, that's going to carry over better to the military press than the military press will carry over to the freestanding handstand push ups. So if you just have to practice one from each category, you figure out the one that's going to have the most carryover to the others. And that's how you can be the most time efficient and the most effective at the same time. So it really comes down to figuring out how to speak a common language and categorize these things when it comes to putting them all together. So if you can see the commonalities in movement in general, as opposed to this is a barbell exercise, this is a body weight exercise, this is a kettlebell exercise, then it's actually very easy to combine them together.
It's really cool, and I don't think that I intuitively would have put that relationship together. That if you do a military press with a barbell, it will not have the same carryover to a body weight handstand press up or push up, whereas vice versa, it's going to have a better carryover. So when we attend the workshop, are those kind of algorithms for what's going to have the most carryover be presented to us? Is that something that we're going to take away from the workshop?
Oh, without a doubt. And actually, that's what led me to choose the exercises I did for the book, Ultimate Athleticism. The idea was to make it as simple as possible and do as little as possible well that will still allow you to do more things.
Awesome. Another thing that you really emphasize in your approach is flexibility, and a lot of strength programs are kind of lacking in this area. So, uh, A, why do you think flexibility is so important? And B, tell us a little bit about how you incorporate flexibility training into your approach with ultimate athleticism.
Oh, absolutely. And I think the main reason people don't value flexibility training enough is just because they don't see the immediate benefit. And to be honest, especially if you're someone who's into lifting heavy weights, it's hard to see the benefit in flexibility training. You're like, well, why would I want to waste my time doing that when I can do another set of heavy squats? But what you're dealing with when you move a weight or you do a movement is you're working against the load, which could be the barbell, or you're working against gravity. But the other thing you're working against is your own inflexibilities. So, for example, if you have a really hard time reaching your arms overhead, you're actually pushing up whatever weight you're using, plus the load of the muscles on the joint that don't allow you to get to that position. So the more freely you can move in any range of motion, and this is what I mean when I talk about movement quality, which is range of motion plus coordination. That's what's going to allow you to move the most weights uh, safely and over the long term because you're less likely to be injured that way.
And we know that your strength approach is influenced from a lot of different things, from being a master RKC kettlebell instructor to your experience with lifting heavy things using a barbell and Olympic lifting. Where do you draw your influence for the flexibility components of your programs?
Gosh, I've gone through so many courses at this point in terms of strength and flexibility and strength and conditioning. And I really think the key is to just be a lifelong learner. The idea of being better every day in some way. So I always make sure I read something every day. I always make sure I write something every day. And, I've been doing that for a couple years now. And I'll be honest, when I first started writing, it was just very shitty. But as long as I go to sleep a little bit smarter than when I woke up, good things tend to happen. As far as the flexibility stuff, I think I learned a lot of what to do from things like dance and martial arts and yoga. And I learned a lot more of the why from a place called Z Health. My friend Dr. Cobb runs Z Health, and he's a very sharp dude, and he understands the nervous system much better than I do. But it really taught me a different way of looking at movement through stimulating the nervous system to get people to unlock whatever potential they had.
Very cool. You were talking about the better every day philosophy, which is kind of your mantra. And I noticed that you're picking up some instruments along the way.
Yeah.
And as a musician, as a guitarist, I went to school originally for music. I think that's awesome.
Oh, that's
You're
cool.
also getting pretty good pretty quickly. I saw that piano piece the other day. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. We at my gym, Ambition Athletics, we do something called the name game before every class, and there's usually a prompt for the name game. So everyone says their name and then either what's their favorite food, or we do a would you rather occasionally, or in this case, we said, what's your best skill? So it was name game, say your name plus your best skill, and I had to think about it a little bit. But I think that my best skill is actually in acquiring more skills. And I know that's almost a little bit redundant, but I find, and this is something I teach in the Ultimate Athleticism course, that you can hit the point of diminishing marginal returns in a lot of different skills much quicker than you can hit professional level. So if, let's say professional level at something takes, 5 years or 10 years, you can get to the point of diminishing marginal returns in like 6 months or 1 year, where you can be recreationally very good at something and get a lot of fulfillment from it. But it will also have carryover to a lot of other skills. So there's a little bit of an inter-skill synergy that you get. And that's part of the reason I wanted to learn music is I saw learning music as an opportunity to learn another language and a way to basically put my money where my mouth is as far as skill development goes. I felt like it wasn't fair for me to just do more athletic pursuits because I do have a good athletic base now based on, coordination, strength, speed, endurance, hand balancing, and I can do all this stuff there, but to apply these same rules for skill building and skill acquisition to something where I had zero background in. I mean, I could not do anything on a guitar. I didn't even really, I was like totally tone deaf. But the key is, just like anything else, that daily practice has made such a huge impact. And it's the same thing with flexibility training. I've been taking guitar for about 6 months now. And my teacher told me two interesting things. He said, I've made more progress than any of his students in 35 years in that amount of time.
Wow.
And he said that 95% of people quit within the first 6 months.
Hmm.
Now, as someone who's very familiar with the gym industry, you know what the churn rate is for people who join a gym. A lot of people are really doomed to failure. So this has really gotten me to look at training from the same skill standpoint as music and understand that it's much more important to develop a strong habit than it is to just, do a workout. It has to be really habit based.
So with so many different skills that you're balancing, you have your own strength practice and your flexibility practice. You got the reading going on and
Mm-hmm.
new musical instruments that you're picking up, and I'm sure a host of other skills that you're working on. How do you find enough time in the day? Uh, how are you able to achieve balance? I can remember back to uh, I found early on in my training career there's a very, very strong similarity between creating a program, being regimented with my own training or a student's training, and also my practice regimen as a musician. So,
Mm-hmm.
I would have it all kind of broken down as, sight reading, this many hours a day, improvisation over, these tunes this
Right.
many hours a day, et cetera, et cetera. So how are you balancing all of this?
It really comes down to scheduling. I have a morning routine right now, and I have an evening routine right now. And there's a little bit of trial and error there too. I find that if I practice guitar and piano in the same session, it's not quite as good as if I just dedicated that session to one instrument. So I just split them up. I do guitar in the morning, I do my 5 minute flow, I do a little short meditation, and then I do my reading and writing. And that's kind of like my morning routine, and that pretty much doesn't break. And then I have my evening routine that's incorporating piano now. And the hardest part is to start those time blocks. Once you get started, it's all about inertia. As soon as you can go from 0 to 0.001, then the rest is like a downhill slope.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like starting a paper, when you're in college. It's like
Exactly.
it's
Once you
awesome.
get started, yeah, it's all about inertia and momentum. And I guess part of the other reason it's I can find time is I don't watch TV or do anything like that. So that the average person watches like 4 hours of TV, and
Right?
as soon as you cut something like that out, you suddenly have a lot of time.
How do you survive without Game of Thrones?
I manage.
Okay, just for the sake of the viewers who want to learn a little bit more about ultimate athleticism, uh, I don't want to get too far off track, but I did hear you mention the 5 minute flow, and that's kind of this phenomenon that's taken over social media, and you have a lot of different fitness professionals taking part in it, and it's really influenced a lot of people in terms of being able to put movement practice in their day. Can you tell us a little bit about how that came about, what it is, etc.?
Sure. 5 minute flow basically came about as a response to the fact that ultimate athleticism wasn't the best starting point if you're totally level zero. And I have now an ultimate athleticism basics program built into it where you work on basic things like, push-ups and rows and body weight squats and things like that, just to give yourself a little foundation. But what I realized is a lot of the people who were buying ultimate athleticism weren't actually the people who needed the help the most. And I actually just wrote an article called Who Needs Fitness Help? And what's interesting is most coaches and trainers are all trying to sell something to the people who are eager to do something athletic and exercise oriented. The people who need the help the most are the ones who are sedentary doing nothing. And if we talk about that inertia, going from zero to something is the hardest part. So what I try to do with 5 minute flow was eliminate all the barriers in front of someone learning how to move well again. So the way you start 5 minute flow is you start with a 1 minute flow. And there's no right way to do it, there's no wrong way to do it. Basically, I just want someone to wiggle for 1 minute in the morning. Move your wrists around, move your neck around. And if you can do that, great. Build on it the next day. And that is the door to better fitness. And exercise in general is referred to as what's called a keystone habit, in that it tends to have a domino effect into other areas of your life and make you want to eat healthier and exercise more and take better care of yourself and have better relationships and things like that. So I did a lot of studying on habit formation to figure out that 5 minute flow would be the best use of a few minutes in the morning of your day every day to make your life better.
And just from the pure movement-based perspective, what kind of benefits have you noticed in your own movement practice, and what have you observed in that of your students and peers and colleagues, on social media who have started partaking in this as well?
Well, I still get quite a few emails and especially Facebook messages from people who have said things like, I've had back pain for many years and doing the 5 minute flow has gotten rid of it. This is pretty common. And some people get so paralyzed by pain and stiffness and things like that, and then they get paralyzed even further by how confusing all of the rehab is sometimes. And I'm not advocating against physical therapy, because I think it is one of the most important professions around, and I think there are a lot of really smart people out there, but a lot of people are just so scared and confused that they almost need permission to just move again. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And I know for myself, when I do my 5 minute flow, it makes the rest of my day better. It is just, it's such a huge part of my life at this point. I can't imagine not doing it anymore, because it really does just have so much spillover into all the other areas of my life, in terms of making me feel better physically and then clearing my head mentally. And it's just great. I haven't had one negative response to 5 minute flow.
Well, talking about the inertia aspect, where the hardest part is to get started, and once you get rolling, it kind of picks up from there. Uh, I imagine that the 5 minute flow, the biggest hurdle for someone new to it, is even just starting to move their body and figuring out
Totally.
what that's even like. So, in addition to the progression of 1 minute to 2 minutes to eventually 5 minutes, are there any other pointers that you can give somebody that just starting out with it, as to an entry point where they could get moving?
Absolutely. And there are some videos that I've put out online on my YouTube channel, and there's also been some articles I've written on my website that detail a little bit more how to get started and outline some of the benefits and progressions. But the key is to just start slow and just make some circles with your joints. And I think the fact that there isn't a lot of instruction you have to follow specifically makes it easier for people to get started. If someone has to watch an hour-long DVD just to wiggle their ankles and wrists, that's another barrier. If someone has to buy a fancy piece of bullshit equipment, that's another barrier. But if I say, hey, listen, there's your space on the floor, go roll around or wiggle around, and as soon as you make that a habit, then we can change it. It's much easier to modify a habit than to create one out of nothing. I did an experiment a few months back, actually, where I was doing high rep push-ups every night before I got in the shower. And I worked up to the point where I could do over 30 push-ups on the back of my wrists, because I thought that would be a cool thing to do. It's like a Bruce Lee, Jackie Chan kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I started out at being able to do 2. And in about 40 days, I was able to do over 30, which is kind of a big improvement, especially for such a weird variation like that. What I found is, once I had ingrained that habit, it was really easy for me to change it from push-ups to squats or burpees or pull-ups or rows or stretching or whatever. But starting a new one is really difficult. So the key is just to figure out the logistics, set out a time block, make it a part of your day, and then it's very easy to modify it later. So you want to make it as easy as possible starting out.
Very cool. To wrap up, I'd like to just talk about ultimate athleticism in its different incarnations. So there are going to be a lot of people at Crunch, both internal to Crunch and also people perhaps that are going to be coming in as external students of this workshop, that they may have seen the link for the workshop and they know about this, but they don't know about the program and the product, or vice versa. There may be
Right.
people that don't know about this workshop coming up at Crunch, and we're going to get the word out to them. They're going to find out about it, but they're only familiar with the product. So can you tell us a little bit about both the differences, the common threads, and we'll go from there.
Sure, absolutely. So the book, the purpose was to make it as easy to digest as possible. I wanted to make it very user friendly. And the other problem I saw with a lot of products, whether it was a workshop or a book, is as soon as you were done reading the book or as soon as you left the workshop, that's where the relationship basically ended. So what I did, whether you buy the workshop or where you attend the workshop or you buy the book, you have access to a forum afterward, where if you have trouble, you can ask questions. And since last December when it launched, there have been over, I think, over 200 different questions answered that were either individual to a certain person, or maybe was something missing for a certain person in the book. So it's been nice to give people that support after the fact. As far as the workshop's concerned, that is much more geared towards some of the why we're doing this, a lot more details, a lot more hands-on work, and really it has evolved quite a bit into things like how to design your own program. So the Ultimate Athleticism book talks a little bit about designing the program based on the specific movements in the book, but the course itself talks about how to put any kind of training modality into the most efficient program based on those tenets of economics that we talked about earlier. So there's a lot of new information in the course, and this will be my sixth course in New York here. And what I've noticed every single time is it changes a little bit. And I think change is good. People often get called like a flip flopper or something like that if they change their mind. But God, I would hope that I get a little bit smarter from month to month and change my mind about a few things. So it really offers me an avenue to add these really important components that I've found work really well through either my students around the world or through the members at my gym.
That's great.
Yeah.
And is this the first workshop that's being held on the East Coast?
This is the first East Coast workshop, yes, sir.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
really excited. I went to New York about 13 years ago for a soccer tournament. I didn't really get to see the city much, but I'm really excited to get out there.
It's great. It's an honor to have you out here, and really exciting for myself and for Crunch to be able to host not only the first Ultimate Athleticism workshop in New York, but also on the East Coast in general. So thank you so much for your time today, and we can't wait. I'll be there. See you on the 19th.
Awesome. Thank you, my friend. Thank you for organizing it, and thank you for continuing to put education and people first over at Crunch.
Absolutely. Thank you, brother.
See you,
See you
buddy.
soon.
Take care.